You also have number formats as well, different formats for numbers, like you can have a date format for those numbers. You also can have, well, for this range, it's our sales, so how about if we put that in currency format? To do that, go ahead and select the cell or range of cells that you want to convert into a different number format. Come up here on the Home tab to the number group, and you got your selections here. In fact, you have the dollar sign, but the dollar sign is in accounting. And if you click on it, it'll put a dollar sign next to it, or you can click on the drop down arrow and choose a different type of accounting format. That's not just in dollars, but also the pound, the euro. Let's go ahead and just click on the accounting. Now, what's the difference between the accounting dollar sign and, well, let me click on the drop down arrow to see other number formats and say the currency? Well, I'll show you. Glad you asked. Let me go ahead and hover in between the two column headers, C and D, and click and drag. So whatever I drag, the column to the left gets expanded. And you can see that the dollar sign for accounting is to the far left of the number, as opposed to with the cell selected, when I come up here and click on accounting and go down to currency, that dollar sign is snug right up against the numbers. So there's your difference. And you can come up here and convert it to a percentage. You can also add a comma style to format with 1,000 separators. So when you get up to the thousands, if you don't have a comma in there, you can add it. You can also increase or decrease the decimal. So if I come over here and decrease it, instead of 110.25, it's now 110.3, so it rounds up. So if it's 5 or greater in the second decimal place, it rounds up the first decimal place 1. Or if it's less than that, then it just keeps it as is. So let's go ahead and undo all that. Or better yet, if you want to go ahead and click and drag and select the range, and to clear it, just come up here on the Home tab to the Editing group and click on there's the eraser, click on the drop down arrow, and you can say Clear Formats, and we're back to where we started. Let me come up here and double click in between the two column headers really fast to do a best fit or an auto fit, so it automatically fits to the longest text within that column or numbers. And the other way that you can go about doing this is by coming up here on the Home tab to the number group and clicking on its expandable dialog box button, or to bring up the same Format Cells window, you can close out and just simply right click on your selection and go down right there to Format Cells as well. And so you get the different number options as you do when you click on the drop down arrow here in the number group, and you can go ahead and select currency, and you can tweak it a bit more than just by selecting it up here from the number group. You can choose the decimal places, you can choose the symbol, click on the drop down arrow, and you've got a lot. In fact, you can go ahead and find the French Canada dollar, or even go down to, wow, Spanish, GS Spanish Paraguay. All right, we'll click off to keep it simple here. And then as far as negative numbers go, you have a list down here you can choose from. So if there's a negative number in the cell, do you want it to just display the minus sign before it? Or do you want it in red? Or do you want it in parentheses? Or do you want it in parentheses and in red? In any case, go ahead and click Okie dokie. So if I come up here and type in -1, hey, there we go, in parentheses and in red. And it only shows up, again, if it's a negative number. How about a date? I don't mean you, silly. I mean the date up here. If you want to go ahead and take a look at the number format here, come up to the Numbers group on the Home tab, click on the drop-down arrow, and you can choose, well, the short date's already there. You can do long date. Ooh, that sounds pretty kooky. Go ahead and select that, and anytime you see a bunch of pound symbols in a cell, it can mean one of two things. Either you typed in the pounds, or it means that Excel can't show you everything that can be seen within that cell. And the reason why it hides it and puts up a bunch of pound symbols, because you can imagine that if, let me do it to this column here, hover in between the two column headers and click and drag. So if I make it really tiny, and we've got a couple of numbers here, and as you can see when I hover over the cell, C8, it gives me the pop-up that the total numbers in there is $200.75, or if it's in thousands, $200,000. In any case, if it can't show everything, it would be deceptive to show you just 200, because then you're missing extra numbers, and that can be very fatal to accounting purposes. So let me come up here, double click really fast in between the two column headers, and then also come up here and do another best fit, and double click in between the two column headers really fast, and it does a best fit to wherever I double click. As far as the columns go, the column to the left. And hey, there it is, Sunday, May 15th, 2016. Now if you want more number formats, you can right click on it and go down to Format Cells. Let me click and drag this over here. And for the date, you got a lot of different options. You can go ahead and scroll through and figure out which one you want, including the time. And you can choose a location. Ooh, that gets kind of crazy. So let me go ahead and just go back to the way it was basically. And that's the sample that you can see right there. Click okie dokie. Cool. In the previous training video, we learned how to apply number formats to a cell that contains a number or a range of cells that contain numbers. Here I want to show you how you can do a basic custom number format. So if the number formats that you see up here in the drop-down list in the number group isn't what you're looking for, you can actually customize one of these or tweak it. Like for the example that I have here, I'm looking at the range of the employee ID, and those are actually social security numbers, so don't mess with these. No, I'm kidding, but let's pretend they're social security numbers. And what I want to do to identify it is to actually customize the format here and add the text, maybe social security, in front of the numbers. How do you do that? Well, go ahead and select the range, and to customize it, let's give it a right click and go down to Format Cells. And on the number tab in the category, we could go down to Custom, but I already know that we've got something special when I select it, that by default, Excel tries to help you out if you want to do a custom format, or a special format in this case, for Social Security number. So when I select it, you can look in the sample preview up above, and it gives us the dash at the appropriate places for the total of 9 numbers. And so it's got the first 3, a dash, 2, dash, and then the last 4. Now, after you select the format that you like, you can actually customize it or tweak it by coming back down here after you selected it, like I did here, Social Security number, because I want to add Social Security in front of the number. Go down to Custom, and it keeps that format into the Custom window, so you can see the sample up above and then the actual details of the format down below, wherein I can go ahead and click inside of it. You can see the cursors flashing, so I can go ahead and do a lot of damage here. But since I know what I'm doing, I'm going to go ahead and add open quotes, and I can type in Social Security, but it's going to be long. Let's just do SS, close quotes, and hit the space bar, and you can see up in the preview window, without the quotes around the text, I won't be able to see it, but because I have it there, it adds SS. Now this is a number format, or a custom number format, and so when you mix text with numbers, it's not really a number format, is it? So it takes the text, when we put it in there in quotes, and it says that's something separate, that's just for you, but as far as Excel is concerned, it's just focusing on the numbers. So if you like what you see, go ahead and click okie dokie, and hey, isn't that cool? So now I know when I look at the numbers here, it's SS for Social Security. And when you select one of the cells, notice up here in the formula bar, it doesn't have SS because, again, that's just for you. That's not what Excel considers the content of the cell that it's focusing on, which is the number and not the text. Now let's go ahead and come down here and type in a Social Security number. I'm just making one up as I go. And there's numerous ways you can apply that custom number format to another cell, like copying and pasting. So if I come up here and select the cell, right click and go to copy, and then come down here and right click and come up in the paste options window, and you're looking for the paintbrush because you want to paint or copy over the formatting of the cell and not to overwrite it with the contents of the other cells. So formatting only, thank you. Select it. And hey, isn't that pretty cool? Or let me go ahead and hit undo. You can also right click on the cell and go to Format Cells. Click and drag this over, go down to Custom, and then scroll all the way down to the bottom because you're not considered top priority when you create a custom field, as opposed to all the other built-in custom templates you can work with. So down at the bottom there it is, SS. Click okie dokie, does the same thing. And then for the sake of laughs, let's say we want to go ahead and update all the IDs from SS Social Security to Employee ID, because maybe we got this wrong. This is actually their own ID, and it's got nothing to do with Social Security. So to update all of this and to change the text from SS to EID, let's go ahead and do Control F to open up the Find window. Let me click and drag this up and go ahead and click on the options. And we want to set the format by clicking on the Format button. To go to Custom, scroll down to the bottom, and we want to look for this format. Then click OK. Then we want to replace that format with another format by clicking on the Format button, going down to Custom, scrolling down, selecting it, but coming up here and changing it from SS to, let's do EID for Employee ID, and then click OK. And then let's go ahead and make the changes. Let's click Find Next, finds it, replace it. Hey, there it is. Let's not mess around and replace all. And the remaining 4 were updated. Cool. Close out. And we have all of them now converted from SS to Employee ID or EID. There may be many reasons why you want to add borders and colors to a cell or a range of cells, perhaps to make it look more aesthetically pleasing, to offset it for organizational purposes. And for this example, I've got the spreadsheet and it has a grid. So it makes it easier for me to organize my data into so I can see the cells, because you can turn off the grid if you come up here and click on the View tab, go to the Show Group, and uncheck Grid Lines. I don't know about you, but that makes it a bit trickier for me to go ahead and identify the length and height of a cell, whereas I have to go ahead and select it to be able to quickly identify it, as opposed to being able to see the grid lines. Now, having said that, do the grid lines print off with the spreadsheet? To find out, go ahead and click on the File tab, go backstage down to Print, and over in the Print Preview, what you see here is what you get out of your printer. So if you don't see the grid lines, they won't print off. Let's go ahead and go back. So if you want to be able to see lines or borders, as it were, around a cell or a range of cells, then go ahead and click and drag to select the range, come up here on the Home tab, and in the font group, it's right there, the bottom border. That's all you get. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow and you can add to the range of cells, or a single cell if you have it selected, a border to the bottom of it, to the top, left, right, all borders, which includes borders in between each column label. Let's go ahead and do bottom border and click off so we can see it, and hey, not too bad. And then we can go ahead and select it again, click on the drop-down arrow, and to add borders all the way around it, or just the outside borders. Let me go ahead and click off so it adds it all the way around. And then to go ahead, if I want to remove a border, let me select the range, click on the drop-down arrow. You can say no border, but if I just want to do it to maybe the right-hand side, the left, or the top, you can use the erase border. Click on that. You get this little gummy that you can click on the top to get rid of it. And it does it just for the selected cells, so I have to do it for each cell, and that could be kind of annoying, especially if I have a huge range and I have to do it for every cell. So what we can do, let me hit the Escape key on the keyboard to get out of the eraser mode, and then click on the drop-down arrow, is instead of working with the templates here, we can go down to More Borders, and it opens up the Format Cells window, takes us to the Border tab, and we get a preview of what we're currently looking at, or what's being applied to the range of cells. And it's got a border to the left, to the bottom, and to the right-hand side. And so if we want to go ahead and play with the preview here and say, okay, I don't want a border on the right-hand side, it'll get rid of it after I click OK. Now, because I have two or more columns, in other words, of the selection I've got two and one more, it'll add at least two columns. So if you add a border by clicking in the preview window in between the two columns, it doesn't add it in between just the two columns, but it duplicates and adds it between all the columns. So it'll be a border here between this cell and average, and between average and commission. And so let me go ahead and click on it to remove it, and notice down below that when I click on it, this button gets highlighted. You can also click on it to toggle in between to adding it or not having it. And then you can come up here and do an outline so it totally completes the circle of life and puts everything in a border around the range. You can also do inside, which only has columns. We can go ahead and get rid of that, or just say none. That may be a lot easier to select none, or do it from the drop-down list and then go ahead and rebuild it here, because you can also choose different styles and different colors. Ooh, this is where it gets kind of kooky. So if I go ahead and choose a different style than the default, that's the default style right there. And you can see that it's flashing. I can come over here and click to add it, or click over here. I don't know if you can see, but those little icons, it's 4 squares within a big square, and it's got a line to the left-hand side to let you know that when you click on it, it'll actually add your line. Now you can go ahead and click on it to remove it, as I mentioned, and click on the drop-down arrow and choose a color. So when I add it, it adds that style with that color. Ooh, let's get even crazier. Choose something else as a style, make it orange, and do the bottom. And then when we're done, go ahead and wait, don't buy yet. How about if we go ahead and come up here and do some fill color? So let's go ahead, instead of adding just borders, but fill it in the range with the color. So we can do something that's soft pastel, like, ooh, look at that, purple, that's fun. You can also add pattern colors. First of all, you may want to choose your pattern, then a color, or it doesn't matter, you can do it vice versa. Click okie dokie, and let's see what it looks like. Click off, and ooh, that's a conceptual nightmare, but nonetheless you get the point and how to customize and add borders of different styles and colors to either one side or all the sides. And then also you can fill it in with a fun color. Let's go ahead and do this again so I can show you that when I select a range that has not only 2 or more columns, but also 2 or more rows. And instead of coming up here and clicking on the drop down arrow, going down to more borders, I can right click the selection and go down to Format Cells. Let me click and drag this. And remember, we were working on borders, but you can also do a fill, which by the way, you can come up here in the font group and keep the bucket, because the bucket also can fill in the colors. But hey, since we're here on the fill tab, we can choose a color here as well. And you can also do fill effects, maybe choose a variant, but if you do that, it's going to have a variant for each cell and not the range. In other words, well, let me show you. It's going to be horrendous, but okay. You can't say that I didn't warn you, but that's the purpose of the training videos, is to find out what to do, and in this example, maybe what not to do. Go ahead and click OK. And then let's go to the border before we click OK and find out the fill, so I can take a look again at the preview window. So like I said, if you have 2 or more columns or 2 or more rows, you'll have the middle option for the columns that when you select that, it'll add a border. Let me click and drag this over in between each column, and if I click horizontally, it'll add a border in between every row because it duplicates that for every row that you have selected. And then I can go ahead and click OK. Let's do something even crazier. Let's do dark green with a thick line in between every row. Click OK, click off, and I told you it was horrendous, but actually that is kind of cool in an odd sort of way. It's like a car crash. Can't seem to take my eyes off of it. And you can see that you got the green in between every row, and then you got the gradient that focuses on every cell and doesn't go for the range where it begins up at the top light and then goes down to blue. No, it's light in every cell down to the bottom of every cell in a dark blue. And if you're like, hey, this is too much for me, my eyes are going buggy, and you don't want to go back through, let me click and drag and select the range and unapply everything. Let's go ahead and clear it out with one nuke, or just come up here on the Home tab to the Editing group, and with the eraser, click on the drop down arrow and say you just want to clear the formats. You don't want to clear the contents or everything, just the formats. And we're back to where we started. And then if for some reason you like what you have here and you want to be able to copy that format because maybe you have a mini database down below here, and so you want to keep it consistent, you don't want to have to rebuild it, then you can go ahead and click and drag and select the range. Right click on it to copy, and then come down here and select your range that you want to paste the format to, and right click, and you want to go to the paintbrush because it's just copying over the formatting and not the contents of the cell. And then to get rid of the marching ants, you hit the escape key on the keyboard, and let's call it good. I got a couple of formatting shortcut features I want to go over with you. One is the Format Painter. So for example, if you have a cell where you add some formats like bold, click on the drop down arrow for the paint and select a nice fun color. Also, let's add a border to the bottom of the cell. Click on bottom border, click off. And so if I want to be able to copy that format and apply it to other cells without having to go back to that cell and pick the same thing, go to the next cell, pick the same thing, then go ahead and select the cell that you want to copy the format or format that have been applied to it, in this case, cell H5, and either right-click on the cell and go to the mini formatting toolbar and click on Format Painter, or come up here on the Home tab to the Clipboard group, and it's there as well. Click on it, you get the marching ants, and you can see right next to my white cross, I get the paintbrush. So I, metaphorically speaking, dipped it into that cell. Now the brush has paint on it, or formatting, so I can go ahead and click on another cell, and hey, isn't that cool? Now it's just a one-time job, so if you have multiple jobs, then the way to keep the paintbrush up is to double-click on it. But first we have to select the cell that contains the formatting that we want to copy, then come up here and double-click really fast, and then you can click here, click here, click here, click and drag there, and you can see the paintbrush will not go away. That is until you either hit the escape key on the keyboard or come back up here and deselect the Format Painter. Let me go ahead and click and drag and select the range and clear the formats by coming up here to the Editing group on the Home tab, clicking on the drop down arrow for clear, and we want to clear just the formats, not everything. And let's do another one. Let's do the shortcut key F4. So if I apply some formatting to the total cell, like let's make it bold, italics, let's make it red, and also underline, and I go to another cell and I want to copy the same format that I applied to that, you can hit the F4 key, but let me click off. Out of all the formatting that I applied, which one did it choose to bring over? The underline, which was the last one that I applied to that cell. So whatever I apply to a cell, if it's a lot of formats, it only remembers the last one, or better yet, if you just want to do one format, bold, go to another cell, hit the F4 key, hit the F4 key, hit the F4 key. But the way to get around this, if you have more than just one format that you want copied by using the F4 key, and that is to actually expand the font group. When you expand it, you can actually do all your customizations here, and then when you hit the F4 key, it'll remember all of it here. So if I go ahead and say, all right, let's make you a strike through. Let's choose double underline. You can see it over in the preview window. Let's also go ahead and do darker blue and click OK. It applies to that cell, right? But when I go to the next cell and hit the F4 key, it does all of the formats that I applied to that cell because I did it in the expandable dialog box of the font group. So for single formats, just do it from the ribbon, hit the F4 key for multiple formats, then go ahead and customize it by expanding the font group and selecting all of your formats there, and then you can use the F4 key to repeat everything that you customize in that dialog box. Okay, people, time to bring out the inner artist in all of us. To do that, we're going to insert a background into our spreadsheet here. Why do you want to do that? If you want a little bit more pizzazz when you're working on your spreadsheet, something that's like, aw, that reminds me of way back when, or a holiday, whatever. I'll let you be the artist. Let's come up here and click on the Page Layout tab, go to the Page Setup group, click on Background. You can do it from a file or searching on the web. Let's go ahead and click Browse and do it from a file on our computer. And I'll choose tulips. Double click. Ooh, okay, that gets quite a bit distracting, but hey, don't judge me. And to be able to get rid of that, if you're like done with it, then come back up here, and instead of adding a background, it's now delete background. Click on that. And then you can go ahead and click on it again, do a search from the internet, like let's do ghost, and hit enter. Let's find something. How about boo? Select it, click on insert, and it tiles because it's small enough. And does this print off? Well, let's take a look. Click on the File tab, go down to Print. What you see here is what you get. So if you don't see it, it's not going to print off. Click on the back arrow. How about on other worksheets? Click Sheet 2. No, it's just for that worksheet. So back to Sheet 1. Let's go ahead and remove it. When it comes to aligning the contents of a cell, you can do it both vertically and horizontally. For example, let me go ahead and expand row 5 by hovering below the row header 5 until I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, so I'm in between row 5 and 6. Then click and drag to stretch it down so I have more vertical space in that cell, or the range of cells here that I want to show you how you can align the content therein. So you can do it for a single cell or select a range of cells and come up here on the Home tab to the Alignment group, and what you see highlighted is the alignment. Now this bottom one, all three commands, is horizontal alignment, and for the top three, it's vertical. So right now it's aligning it centered and to the bottom of the cell. For vertical, if I want to go up to the top, click on it, and everything that I have selected, the contents therein go to the top of each cell, or to the center, or to the bottom. And then you can do it horizontally, where it aligns to the left-hand side of each cell, to the center, or to the right. Or, for fun, you can go ahead and change the orientation of it by clicking on the drop-down arrow and say, ooh, I'd like to have it go at an angle counterclockwise. Click on it, and that's okay with me. Next, let's go ahead and learn how to merge cells. So, looking at cell A1, it's bleeding over into cell B. It's not actually going into cell B because if it was, it would be merged. In other words, when I go ahead and click in cell B1, there's nothing there. But because there's nothing there, A1 is bleeding over into it because the width of the column isn't wide enough to contain all the contents therein. So if I type in something in B1 and hit enter, it cuts it off. Let me go ahead and hit undo. So one of the reasons why you may want to go ahead and merge cells together so it's not bleeding over is so if you're collaborating on a worksheet and says, hey, look at this, there's actually nothing in B1. Let me go ahead and type something in there. And then you're like, okay, I can't see the title of my database here. It's Camping Gear. What's that? So let's go ahead and undo that and merge it together. And to do it, just go ahead and select the cells, 2, 3, 4, or as many that you want to merge. And then come up here on the Home tab to the Alignment group, and it's right there. You got Merge and Center, and you can see in the pop-up, it'll take the cells, and after it merges them all together, it'll then center the contents of that first cell into all other cells in the center. You can click on the drop-down arrow. You get a bunch of options here. Merge and center, merge across, merge the cells, and then, of course, unmerging what you merged. Let's go ahead and do merge and center, and voila. Cool, so now when I click off and I go, okay, let me go ahead and go to B1. When I click on it, it takes the first cell in that range that's been merged and says that represents, as you see up in the name box, the entire range. So even though I'm trying to click in cell C1, no, it's A1 for everything that has been merged within that range. And then to unmerge it, well, you can just come up here on the Home tab and deselect it and it unmerges, or let me go ahead and undo it so it's remerged. Then you can click on the drop down arrow and also go to unmerged. That works as well, but notice what happens when I unmerge it. Let me click off. It's being cut off because the alignment of the cell is now centered horizontally and not to the left. So when I come up here to the alignment group, it's like, wait a second, you're actually being cut off because it's centered. Let me go ahead and align it horizontally to the left so I can see everything and have it begin to the left with the camping and going over, as opposed to, well, you can align right, then it cuts it off there. And so I'm looking at from the end of the content within the cell to it being cut off there. So that doesn't work for me. And then finally, we have text wrapping. So if you don't want to merge cells because we actually have something over here that's legit, we got a bunch of numbers, text, data, whatever you want to type in there, but you don't want it cut off, you can actually wrap the text so when it gets to the end and there's nowhere else to go, instead of being cut off, it'll actually wrap it around and put it below the text that can be squeezed into this amount of space and keep doing it until it can fit everything in vertically. So let's go ahead and select it. Come up here on the Home tab to the alignment group, and it's right there. You can see in the pop-up that little preview that if it's being cut off, go ahead and click on Wrap Text. It takes whatever it can't squeeze in and wraps it down below. And if it continued on, like if it came up here in the formula bar and continued the text and hit enter, it's going to keep expanding that vertically so the row becomes a lot larger for everybody in that row. So it's doing like a best fit to fit everything, to be able to fit the contents of the largest cell vertically as opposed to the others that don't take up that much space, like number 6. And then of course to go ahead and undo that, select it and deselect it and it gets cut off. And then if you want to get more particular or see more options, of course you got the expandable dialog box button for the alignment group. Click on it. And pretty much everything that we did here in this training video, you can do on the alignment tab in the format cell window. You can do your text alignment horizontal or vertical. You can actually do an indent. Hey, that sounds pretty cool. So instead of just aligning it to left, center, or right, how about if we just indent it just a little bit? So let's indent it. Let's see what 2 does. So we'll indent it 2 over for cell A1 and click okie dokie. And it pushes it over just a little bit. In fact, let's delete the contents of cell B1, and you can see it gives us a little bit of space. So if you want to give it a little bit of padding, well, there you go. You can also right-click on the cell and then go down to Format Cells. There's the Alignment tab. Click on the drop-down arrow. You get some additional options here, besides the basics that we worked on, left, center, and right. And you can also do it by indent. And we'll go back to 0. And then bottom, you also got the text control. You can wrap the text, shrink the text to fit the cell, merge the cells. So if they're merged, you'll see a check here. If you want to unmerge it, uncheck it, the text direction, left to right or right to left if you want to flip it, and the orientation as we talked about up here. But this, you can actually control it by degree, either by clicking and dragging it or typing it in numerically to get more particular. And I'll keep it as is and go back to 0 and click OK. Got rid of the indent, but still left aligning. In earlier training videos, we learned how to apply formatting to the contents of a cell or range of cells or even the cells themselves. Here I want to introduce you to cell styles. It's a collection of formats that you can apply to a cell or range of cells in a single click. And to see if you like any of these pre-built-in format styles, let's go ahead and take a gander by coming up here on the Home tab to the Styles group, and it's right there, Cell Styles. You can see when I hover over it, the pop-up says a colorful style is a great way to make important data stand out on the sheet. Ooh, I'm sold. Let's go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow to see if we have anything that we like. And it's categorized like the good, bad, and neutral. Now, because it says that, it doesn't mean that when you select one, well, better yet, hover over one, and whatever cell or range of cells you have selected in your worksheet, it'll give you a preview of it. So keep your eye on this as I hover over bad. Now, does it change the text to bad? No, it just changes it to red. But the purpose of the style is to apply it to cells that are bad, they're naughty, or if they're good, and we're making a lot of sales, then go ahead and use the good. So to apply one, just go ahead and click on it, and there you go. If you can't see it because it's cut off, just hover in between the 2 column headers, double click really fast, and that looks good. Now, if you like the majority of the style, but you want to tweak it, go ahead and come back up here, click on Cell Styles, find it, then right click on it, and you get a bunch of options in the shortcut menu. You can go ahead and apply it, but you can do that by clicking on it. You can modify it, which I'll show you in just a minute. You can duplicate it, so that way you don't touch the original. You can create a duplicate of it and then make changes to it so you still have the original template, or you can delete it. I'm not going to do that. So if you want to go ahead and modify it, select it, opens up the window here. And you can see down below that it's only including font, border, and fill. If you want to modify it, so instead of being Arial 10, go ahead and click on the Format button and go to the Font tab. You can see Arial size 10. You can make it size 18. I'm not going to modify it. Click Cancel because I don't want to mess with my original. So that brings up a good point. Let me click Cancel. Click on the drop-down arrow, right-click on it again, and duplicate. So it opens it up, and you can go ahead and give it a name, and then click on Format, choose the different formats that you want, and if you don't want to include one, then just go ahead and uncheck it. And if you do want to include it, then check it. And then the default for the alignment is the general bottom aligned. I'm going to go ahead and click Cancel. Now, speaking of duplicate, basically you're creating a new style. So if you like a style, you can just come back up here, click on Cell Styles, and go down and say, I want a new cell style. Click on it, opens it up, go ahead and give it a name, and then click on Format and choose whatever you want to apply to that cell style, including the number format, how you align the contents of a cell, the font type, whether it's going to be bold or not, underline, color, border, any fill. I'm going to go ahead and close out. And then you can go ahead and give it a name, then click OK, you'll have the style. Or, if you'd like, another way to create the style besides doing it this way is to go ahead and click Cancel and apply the formats to a range of cells. And after you apply it, you can actually create a new cell style based upon your selection. So with my selection, I can go ahead and click the bucket here and choose a nice fill color. And then maybe a border, something outside, not too thick. And let's do something complementary. Let's do dark blue and then make the contents bold. And as far as alignments, let's align it to the center. And then with it selected, you can come back up here to Cell Styles and go down and click on New Cell Style. And what it does is it brings in everything in the selection over here, so you don't have to go ahead and click on Format and choose those formats. So like we chose the fill, and that's what we got there, the fill, so it's automatically pulling it in for us. And if you want to do additional tweaks, then go ahead and do it here. Otherwise, let me click Cancel and say this is going to be my style. It's going to be my fun style. And then click OK, and that's it. So if I want to apply the fun style to another range, go ahead and select the range or even a cell. Come back up here, click Cell Styles, and hey, there's our fun style that, of course, you can right-click on and modify, duplicate, delete, or apply, and applies it to the selected range. Cool. Finally, if you have a workbook that has a style that you'd like to merge into your workbook because you don't want to recreate it, for example, let me minimize this down to the taskbar on my desktop. Let's see, there's my original workbook that we're working in, Create Manage Styles, and then there's one that's called number 2. So if I double click on that and open it up, in this workbook, when I click on Cell Styles, it's got its own custom spiffy style. So if I want to bring that over into, let me come down here on the taskbar and click on the corresponding button for the original workbook that we've been working in thus far, and bring it over into here and to merge it, because you can see up here I don't get the spiffy there, but to bring it over, you got to have the other workbook open, because if you don't, you won't be able to see it. So now that I have the other workbook open that I want to take a copy of the style, merge it into this one, then come down here and click on Merge Styles. It says, do you want to go ahead and merge it from this workbook? Select it, say okie dokie. And then it says merge styles that have the same names, yes or no, because if they have the same names, it'll overwrite yours. And you can say no. And then that way it won't overwrite yours, but it did bring over the spiffy because it didn't have the same name as the style that I had up here. Let me click on it, the fun style. So hey, there it is. Now I can go ahead and use it. Select a range, click on it, apply it. I'm good. The AutoFormat feature contains a gallery of predefined formats you can apply to a range of cells in a single click. In other words, when you have your mini database, like your labels left-hand side and then the labels for each column, go ahead and select your range, and then to apply the AutoFormat or to see what kind of formats are available, and if you don't like them, go ahead and apply one. You can always tweak it. Then we need to add the AutoFormat command to the Quick Access toolbar because it's not available by default. To do that, come up here and right-click on the Quick Access toolbar, go down to Customize it, and then change it from Popular to All Commands, and it's sorted after numerically, alphabetically, so we'll go down to the A's, and there it is, AutoFormat. Double-click on it to add it over to the right-hand side, click OK. There it is. It's got a little lightning bolt, so it means it's automatic, fast as lightning. Go ahead and click on it. And you can see all these different templates for you to choose from. You can scroll down and take a look at them. And then let me click and drag the title bar up. You got more options. So if you're looking at different number formats and you want to see what it looks like without it, go ahead and uncheck it. And some of these that have like dollar signs and number format applied to it get removed. Also borders, uncheck it. It removes some of the borders that have been applied to these different types of templates. So you can go ahead and see if you want to apply or unapply it. And then when you find one that you really like and you want to keep all of them or tweak it, then just go ahead with it selected, and it's selected because it's got that gray border around it, and then click Okie dokie, and shazam! It's been applied like lightning. And like I said, you can tweak it, so you can select a range here and say you want to make it bold, maybe not use that color, so click on the fill bucket drop down arrow, something lighter, not too bad. A theme is a collection of fonts, colors, and effects that can be applied to the entire workbook in a single click. That means if you want to be able to have like your headings, the labels for your columns and your rows, to be in one type of font, but yet different enough to distinguish between the body of the database. So you can say, okay, those are actually labels for the rows and the columns to offset it, but nothing's so contrasting that it's jarring and you can't focus on the database. Then you may want to take a look at the built-in themes that are available, but not just for fonts, but also for colors and effects. So for like your shapes, objects, charts, smart art, they'll have complementary colors and effects for those as well. So to take a look at themes to see what's available, and if you like one to apply it to the entire workbook, come up here and click on the Page Layout tab, go to the Themes group, and there you go. You have your themes here that are made up again of colors, fonts, and effects. So to find a theme that may work for you, click on the drop-down arrow, and you got quite a few. You can go ahead and scroll down and take a look at all the other thumbnails. But let me go ahead and explain the thumbnail. You have the uppercase A and lowercase a. That represents your theme fonts. So the uppercase A is for the headings, the lowercase a is for the body. So when you define your headings as well, your labels here for the column, and then the lowercase a, the body, for the body font, then when you go ahead and hover over one of these, you can see how different they are. It'll update it and reflect it in the workbook. And then down below that, you've got your complementary colors. You have colors for that theme. You have different colors for the other themes you can see. And also, if there's any background color that you want to update, it'll reflect that as well. So to give you a sample here, if I hover over Ion Board, when you look over to the right at the worksheet, I want you to notice the data in the workbook and also the shape, the arrow that's pointing up. So I go over here, and are you noticing something? You can go ahead and rewind the video. When I come over here, the only thing that's updating is this database right here and the shape. How come the data over here isn't updating, or even the 8% in cell H3? The reason being is because you can actually turn off the functionality of the themes by choosing a non-theme font. And this only applies to fonts, not colors or effects. It'll always update your smart art objects, charts, if you want to choose a theme. But for the fonts, you have to choose a theme font. What does that mean? Well, let's go ahead and click on the Home tab, and then select a cell that has a theme font, and click on the drop-down arrow for our fonts, and notice you got two sections. You have your theme fonts, which only contains two, the one for your headings and the rest for the body, which is the body of the database, and then you have your regular fonts. If you choose a non-theme font, just another regular font down below, like if I type in, let's just come up here, and I've got total selected, so that's a theme font. It's got Calibri Light, and that's a heading. So if I come up here and I say, no, I don't want to use that. I want to type in a regular font, Arial, and it comes down here and I choose Arial. Then when I come back up here to the page layout, because it's not a default theme font, when I go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow to choose another theme, notice all the other labels here are updating, or the headings, but not that cell because it's a non-theme font. Which is interesting because if you choose something that's non-theme, it means you can't choose a theme and update it in a single click. That's out of its range. So let me go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow and choose something else like Slice. And then you'll see that when I select that cell, come up here on the Home tab, the heading is Century Gothic, and let's see if it's the same down below. It is. So I can come up here on the page layout, choose another theme, Celestial, and select that. Go to the Home tab, Calibri Light, down below, Calibri. So you're either going to get the same font for your headings and the body, or something that's close but different enough that you can say, okay, I think those are the labels. To me, it doesn't really look different enough. It kind of looks like it's blending. In fact, it looks a bit smaller for the labels, but still it's different to be complementary. And if you're like, no, I don't want to work with that theme, you can come back up here on the Page Layout tab as far as the fonts are concerned. And remember, your themes are made up of colors, fonts, and effects. So after you choose a theme, if you're like, well, I like the colors and effects, but I don't like the fonts, then go ahead and click on the fonts drop-down arrow and hover over to get a preview to the right-hand side for an update of those fonts. And again, you got the big A and the little a. In fact, it defines it here. The big A for your headings is going to be Arial, then the little a is going to be for the body of the message. Now, because it's smaller, it doesn't necessarily mean that the font type is going to be smaller. It's just trying to define and show you that these are for the headings and that's for the body of the message. So that way you can choose a different type of font by scrolling down and updating it in a single click. If you don't like what you see here, you're not stuck with it. You can actually create your own custom fonts for your themes. But we'll cover that in a later training video. Well, we started it. We might as well finish it. You also have your colors. Click on the drop-down arrow. If you don't like the colors of the current theme that you selected over here, but you like everything else, of course, you can choose a different color like blue-green. And notice how the arrow gets updated. Now, because I only have the arrow shape, you're not going to see the effects of all the colors, like if we had a chart, smart art, like an organization chart, things like that. But you'll see that if you go ahead, choose one of these different palettes here. You can also customize it, click off. You also have effects. So just keep your eye on the arrow pointing up as I hover over each one of these effects. And you can't customize effects. What you see here is what you get. So you have to choose one. And then after you choose all that, you can go ahead and save it and create your own custom theme, but we'll cover that in a later training video. The main focus of this training video is to learn how to apply themes, and it's really simple. Just go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow and find one, and it'll update everything within the entire workbook. But it won't update any data within the workbook that isn't by default a complementary theme. So this brings up a point that when you install Excel 2016 by default, let me go to the Home tab, it's going to have your theme fonts. So when you start typing, it's already going to be in action. You can just go ahead and click on the Page Layout tab and choose the theme, and you won't have to worry about it. But if you get outside of that and say, no, I'm going to change this to a non-theme font without using themes to change the fonts, then you won't be able to have the theme updates applied to the contents of that cell. Which brings me up to another point. For me, I don't care to use theme fonts, at least not for what I do. So you can come up here, click on the File tab, go down, Backstage to Options, the General tab selected by default, and come down here and it says use this as the default font. By default, when you install Excel, it'll be body font. And so that's the theme font to let Excel know that if you want to go ahead and use themes, it'll automatically update the fonts to whatever theme that you choose. But if you go outside of that, so like me, I said, look, I don't want to use body font because I don't use themes. I want every new Excel workbook that I create to be in Arial. Then I can come up here and type in Arial and choose that. Then when I create a new workbook, let me go ahead and click cancel. All the cells will be a non-theme font. So when I go ahead and use themes and try to update, choose a theme, I can't update any of the fonts within the workbook unless, of course, as you see over here, I select a range and come up on the Home tab and say, okay, for this range, I will use a theme font. It'll be body, and for my headings here, the labels, for the database, I will use the theme font for the headings, and then I can go ahead and choose a theme, or if I just want to work with fonts and update the fonts within the workbook to one of the theme fonts, then, well, have fun. Go ahead and choose one, and away you go. And you know what? It may be good to have that mix where you have some cells you can update on the fly with themes and others where you want it to be static and not updatable when somebody chooses a different theme as far as fonts are concerned, because anything else, effects and colors, you don't get a choice to block out. They'll automatically update if you choose a theme that updates the colors or effects, or you actually choose a color itself, one of the palettes there, or one of the effects. Conditional formatting is applying formatting to cells when a criteria is met. For example, if I want to be able to, in the range of data here of books that we sold, fantasy, fiction, self-help, I want to be able to find those that are greater than a certain number, like maybe 250. Then with it selected, come up here on the Home tab to the Styles group and click on the Conditional Formatting drop-down arrow and go down to Highlight Cells Rules to those that are greater than what? Go ahead and click on it and define that. Greater than 250. And notice how it highlights those with the light red fill, dark red text. Go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow, and you've got some other options, including your own custom format, in which case you can go ahead and set the format, make it bold, do a fill color or something. I'm going to click cancel and just go with something like green fill with dark green text. Select it, get a preview of it. If you like it, click Okie dokie, click off, and hey, there's everything that is highlighted that is greater than 250. Not exactly at 250, but greater than 250. And then to go ahead and clear that off, you can come up here, click on Conditional Formatting, and go down to Clear Rules for the selected cells or the entire sheet. So I'd have to go back and reselect it, but let's do it for the entire sheet. Clears it off. And let's go ahead and do it again, only this time let's do something else and see what we got going for conditional formatting. How about the top bottom rules? Let's take a look at the bottom 10%. Ooh, let's see what months we really didn't do well in. Select it. The default's 10%, but if you want the bottom 25%, type it in and you can do, well, with again, the different options there or your own custom format. Click Okie dokie, and all those cells are the bottom 25% of our total cells. And let's see, the months that didn't do well are January, May, and September. We had at least 2 genres that weren't doing well in those months. Let's go ahead and this time select the range. Come up here, Conditional Formatting, to clear the rules for the selected cells. And let's find out another one. Click on Conditional Formatting to Data Bars. Ooh, this is fun. Gradient Fill. Go ahead and choose your favorite color. Click on it. And what that does is it takes the cells that contains the largest number in comparison to all the other cells and has the data bar go all the way over to the right. And the cells that you see the data bar at the smallest are those that have the lowest number, and in this case in sales. 100 for January for self-help and fiction. And then we can go ahead and just undo that if we don't want to clear it. And we have the undo option available. Click on Conditional Formatting. We can also do color scales. So instead of just data bars defining what is high and what is low, you can also use a color scale here that, well, it explains it there, green, yellow, red, meaning that the color indicates where each cell value falls within that range. So when I select it, the green ones, you'll notice, are at the higher range, and then it gets to soft green to yellow. Ooh, we're getting into red, the lowest range, 100. And then we can go ahead and hit undo. Click on Conditional Formatting one more time. You've got the icon sets, so if you want to define it by that, like maybe star ratings, select it. So those stars that have no fill, ooh, not good in cells in comparison to all the other cells, and those stars that are completely filled in are the ones that we made the highest cells in. Well, like for the month of December, we did great for all 3 genres. After you apply conditional formatting to your sheet, you want to be able to edit or delete them. Then come up here on the Home tab to the Styles group, click on Conditional Formatting, and go down to Manage Rules, and it opens up the Rules Manager. And with my current selection, there's no conditional formatting that's being applied to it, so it doesn't show it down below. But there is conditional formatting, as you can see behind the window here on the worksheet. So click on the drop-down arrow and say this worksheet, and we got a total of 3. So if you want to delete one, go ahead and select it, click on Delete, click Okie dokie, and it's gone. I'm going to go ahead and undo that because, let me go back to the Manage Rules and do it for this worksheet. I want to explain something else in just a minute. You can also edit the rules, so like with the stars here, select it, click on Edit, and in the Edit Formatting Rule window, choose a different style if you want, choose a different icon set, click off, and also you got some different values that you can set for the star, like if it's going to be solid, it's got to be greater than or equal to 67, and to meet the halfway star, it's got to be less than 67 but greater than equal to 33, and then anything less than 33 is going to be 0, no color. I'm going to go ahead and click Cancel. And you can also create a new rule from this window, which is a more advanced feature, and we'll talk about that in a later training video. When you click on it, you get different types of options. Let's go ahead and close out of that. And then notice we've got these up and down arrows here. If you have more than one conditional formatting rule applied to the same range, and there are conflicts, the rule that's above the other will have higher precedence. So what I'm looking at is that this rule right here is the same range as this rule down below. But because this one is up on top, it takes higher precedence, so I'm just seeing the arrows. If I want to see the stars, then I can select that and click up, and then click Apply, and it updates because that takes precedence over the same range, as opposed to the one that's now in the hierarchical structure below the one that's on top. So if you want to toggle in between the two, just go ahead and change the order thereof. That way you don't have to go ahead and select one and delete it and have to recreate it later on. What you're looking at here is my Dreamforce payroll, and let me scroll down so you can see it goes all the way down to row 72. Now before I go ahead and print it off, I want to take a look at it to see what it looks like in the print preview because I don't want it to cut off something that should have been printed. So to see what it looks like before it gets printed, click on the File tab, go backstage down to Print, and there's the print preview. What you see there is what's going to be coming out of your printer. So I can see the overview of it, and if I want to go down to page 2, just go ahead and click on it to advance to it. Of course, if you add dozens of pages, you can actually click in the spin box, delete the number there, type in a number, hit enter, and it'll take you right to it. And then over to the right, if you want to zoom in on it, go ahead and click on to zoom into page, click on it to zoom back out. And I want to tweak it before I go ahead and print this. Like for example, it doesn't print the grid lines. They're not going to be displayed by default in the print preview to print, nor does it show the column labels, the column headers, and the row headers. So let's go back and come up here and go to the page layout, and then come over here to sheet options. Now right now we're viewing the grid lines. If I go ahead and uncheck it, the grid lines disappear. Go ahead and check it and they reappear. So if I want them to print as well, go ahead and check it, and then when I click print preview, I should be able to see it before I print it. You also got the headings, which is the column headings, alphabet, and then the row headings, the numbers. When I uncheck it, I can't tell what cell I'm in unless I look at the name box, or at least what column, what row. So I'll view those. If I want to print them, go ahead and check that as well. Now notice, between columns J and K, we get this dashed line. After you go to the print preview and you come back to your front stage, or the normal view, what it does is it sections off and lets you know that if you want to add another column, don't go beyond the dotted line, because if you do, it's going to be cut off and it won't all fit on the first page. So there's the parameters there, and it goes all the way down to row 72, but notice here that there's one that's horizontal. So right before land spoil, that's where the page break hits. And if I want to be able to change that and say, okay, let's page break a bit earlier before Kyle Purple, we can learn that in a later training video. We'll cover that, how we can mess with our page breaks. But for right now, let's go ahead and keep it simple. Go backstage File, down to Print, and hey, there we go. You can see up here I've got my column headers and my row headers, and we've got the grid. In fact, let's go ahead and click on it to zoom in. And if that works for you, let's go ahead and hit the big print button. And you get other options, settings, print active sheets, or print entire workbook, or just print what you have selected. So if you selected cell A5 through C7, then I'll just print that selection. Let's go ahead and click off. You can do the collate, print orientation, letter, custom margins, and we'll cover the page setup in a later training video, but for right now, it's a print. This worksheet is the same one that we used in the previous training video, except I went ahead and stretched out the columns to make them larger. So that way when I go to print this, it's going to cut off a couple of columns because it can't be squozen in. And the reason why I wanted to do that is to get you into page orientation of portrait and landscape, because by default, portrait is more vertical and you get more rows printed on a page, as opposed to landscape, which is more horizontal. You get less rows, but you get more columns printed on that page. So for example, to see what it looks like right now, come up here, click on the File tab, go backstage down to Print, and in Print Preview, you've got the rate and gross that's been cut off. So if I go to page 2, is it there? No, it continues with the data, but then the cutoff columns appear on page 3. And that doesn't work because on page 4, it continues with those cutoff columns. Okay, that's not working for me, so what I can do, let me go back. You can see where the page break is with the dashed line in between columns G and H. So I could go ahead and collapse the columns, but you can imagine if you can't collapse the columns any further and it really takes up that much space, then the other option you have is page orientation, and you can do it one of two ways. You can either come up here and click on the Page Layout tab, go to the Page Setup group and click on Orientation down from Portrait to Landscape so it's wider and it can fit more columns there but less rows, or you can go backstage just before you print it, go down to Print, and change it from vertical to landscape. And then let's take a look. Now we have a total of 2 pages instead of 4, and rate and gross is right there. Well, if you can't see it, go ahead and click on Zoom, and then scroll over. And there's rate and gross, and go to page 2. And let's go ahead and click on it to zoom out. It fits the rest of the data onto page 2. You have less space vertically, but you got more space horizontally with landscape. As you recall in the past couple of training videos, before I print my worksheet, I want to take a look over in the print preview window because what you see in there is going to come out of your printer. And so if you don't like it, you better make some changes. For example, let's come up here and click on the File tab, go backstage down to Print, and take a look at the print preview. It's got all my data here, and it spills over onto page 2. And you can see up at the top, I've got the labels for every column, the list, first, last, social security number. Well, it's really tiny, but you can come down here to click on the zoom in button to see it. List, first, last. But when I go to the second page, okay, is this the first or is that the last name column? Without the labels being repeated up at the top on the next page, it's hard to tell. I'd have to flip back to the first page and go, okay, the first page, okay, that column is for first name, so let me go ahead and go back to it. Instead, we can use the rows to repeat at the top of every page before we print this off. So we can select the row that contains all the labels and say, go ahead and repeat at the top of the next page so we can identify what the columns are. And to do that, well, you can't do it backstage, even though you have the page setup link. When you click on that and go to the Sheet tab, you can't click on the collapsible dialog box button to have the row repeated up at the top, because when you click on it to select the row, you can't select anything in the print preview, so we got to get out of here. You can just view the work that you've done there. So let's go ahead and click the back arrow, come up at the top, click on the Page Layout tab, go to the Page Setup group, and there it is, Print Titles. Go ahead and click on it. It takes you right to the Sheet tab in the Page Setup window, and we want to print the titles. For this example, we want to print the titles or labels for the columns, and it's all in one row. So we want to print the row at the top of every page that we're going to be printing off. So to get that onto the second page or third or fourth page or every page, if we had more pages, go ahead and click inside of it, click on the collapsible dialog box button, and then let's go ahead and click and drag the title bar so we can move the window out of the way. And then notice that I don't have a white cross, I have a black arrow. So whatever cell I click on, it selects that entire row. If I want to add more rows, then just click and drag to extend your selection, but you cannot select non-contiguous rows. In other words, you can't click on here, hold down the Control key and click on the one up above and have a gap in between, because if you do, and you click on this to expand it again, and click and drag it up and click okie dokie, it says it has to be contiguous. You can't have gaps. Okie dokie. So let's go ahead and delete that. Click on the collapsible box again, drag it down, click on the row that we want to repeat at the top of every page that we're printing off, hit the Enter key on the keyboard to pop it back open, and then go ahead and click on Print Preview. So there's page 1. We've got our labels, of course, we expect that. Then on page 2, hey, there we go, we've got our labels there as well. So I can tell that this is the first name for the second column, last name, and so on. Now this workbook is for printing title rows, the rows at the top of each column. Let's go ahead and close out of that, and not save it. And then this example is for printing title columns. In other words, let's go ahead and go backstage, File, down to Print, take a look at the print preview. We got a total of 4 pages. So what's happening is when I go to page 2 and then page 3, it can't squeeze all of the columns on there because the columns are too wide or they got too much data. So it took 2 of the columns and put it over onto page 3, and that's rate and gross. And then it's got its data, and since it can't all squeeze vertically, rate and gross on page 3, it extends over into page 4. So the problem that I'm running into is, like, if I got so much data and I can't squeeze it all and I've tried all the other options and I'm okay with printing it off, but I can't identify whose rate this is and the total gross that they earned for that week, what I can do, let's go ahead and click back, is say that I want to choose columns to repeat on every page. So when I get to page 3 and 4, like for, let's scroll down here, for maybe Jennifer Wilco, I can say she's the one that's earning $123.45 an hour, and that's what she earned for that week. So I can put some columns together. In this case, let's do these 2 columns next to these 2 columns for pages 3 and 4. In fact, if you scroll up and you notice you've got the dashed line, that's the page break, right? As we talked about in earlier training videos. And as you go down, it goes all the way down, and you'll notice that you got a horizontal page break. So you have 4 different quadrants is what you're looking at here. And then this is the first quadrant, and as far as printing goes, it prints the first quadrant, or it goes from top to bottom and then left to right. So going from top to bottom, Excel is going to print this, then the second quadrant, and then it goes from left to right after it finishes everything in this column. Then it goes over to the next one, or after the vertical page break. And this is quadrant 3, prints that on page 3, and then down below this page break, but to the right of that one, is quadrant 4. So that's printed on page 4. So on page 4, I don't have the titles for these columns, so I may want to hit 2 birds with 1 stone and go ahead and add the column labels for these 2 columns. But in addition to that, I want to have these 2 columns repeated so it comes onto that page so I can again identify who's making this kind of money and earning that much for that week. So to do this, let's go ahead and come up here, click on the Page Layout tab, go to the Page Setup group, click on Print Titles, and like I said, we'll do 2 birds with 1 stone. Let's go ahead and do the rows to repeat at top as we just did. Click on the collapsible dialog box button. Let's scroll up to the top. Do it for that row, so that repeats at the top of every page. Hit Enter to pop that open. And then let's go ahead and do the columns to repeat at the left of those pages that they are not on. And click its collapsible dialog box button. And let's do first and last. Now up at the top, Dreamforce LLC, you want to make sure that when you select entire columns or rows that you don't have merged cells that are part of the selection, otherwise it's going to choke and it won't let you do it. So if they're merged, then go ahead and unmerge them. If it goes within the selection of these marching ants, as in this case for these 2 columns that I want to repeat, at the left on every page. Then hit the Enter key on the keyboard, click on Print Preview, and let's take a gander. So we got page 1, makes sense. We got everything over here, but rate and gross got cut off, so we can go to page 2. And then we had the labels repeated up at the top on page 2 as well as page 3 right here. But in addition to that, I wanted to have columns repeated on every page, the first and last name. So that way when I look at the rate, let me go ahead to click on to zoom in with the zoom in button, that I can see, wow, Max is making $75 an hour, $3,000 for the week. We better cut his hours. And then you can also see that on page 4 as well. So you can identify the person that's making so much an hour. Oh, that's even worse. Jennifer Wilco is making a lot more than I think anybody else. And so again, you got the columns repeating on every page, and then of course the rows repeating at the top of every page. And then when you're in Print Preview, if you want to verify what you have for your titles that are repeating at the top, or for the columns to the left on every page, you can come down here and click on the Page Setup link, go to the Sheet tab, and you can view them there without going to the front stage or out of the backstage view. And again, you can't make any changes here because you can't select anything. It's a preview. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.